So we are going to look at equality, diversity and inclusion. So I'm going to refer to some videos which are on the VLE, which are really worth watching. They're probably a bit too long to actually watch here. We might look at a short clip, but the other ones we'll look at on the screen. So I'm going to just share my screen and get my PowerPoint up. Okay, so the first bit is thinking about what equality and diversity is. So what do you feel by do you think the difference is between equality and diversity?
Equality is treating everyone the same.
Yeah.
And diversity is maybe, not sure about that one. Just
any idea, Chrissy?
Inclusion of everybody.
Yeah, so yeah, as you say, equality is making sure everyone's got equal access to everything that we do. We don't treat anybody differently. And diversity is looking at including everybody regardless of their cultures and celebrating the diversity that we've got in our schools, colleges, etc. So sort of a bit like the Black Lives Matters agenda that's springing up at the moment. It's been acceptable to those. There is a video, but it doesn't come up very well, so I'll leave that video, but it is on the VLE, and it's just a quick video that just shows you the difference between equality and diversity. So there it is. Diversity, accepting everybody's individual and different. And equality is giving everybody equal access to those opportunities. So every school will have an equality and diversity policy in some form or other. So even at RACPD, where I work, we've got an equality and diversity policy. We make it clear that everybody's equal in our eyes and we accept everybody's differences. I just realised there's a spelling mistake in there, isn't there? It's got an extra C in it. Don't know where that's propped up from. So there's quite a bit of legislation to do with equality and diversity, and the main one is the United Nations Convention on the Rights of a Child. I think we've mentioned this one already before, and again there's a short video clip on the VLE about this. So we took it on board in 1991, and it shows that all the children's rights are protected by law. So it states things like they've got equal, should have access to education, healthcare, their views should be respected, etc. And nearly all the countries in the world have signed up for this, bar the United States of America. So it's enshrined in law, and most of our legislation leads from this United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. And so the video on the VLE goes through the history of how this came into place, and talks about what the rights of the child are, what adults need to do to give these children those rights. The real essential piece of education legislation there. Then along with that, and I say the videos on the VLE, these are the other legislation. So these are the things that you'll need to fill in on that big sheet, the legislation sheet. So Disability Discrimination Act. So obviously trying to eradicate people with disabilities being discriminated against. I think we've still got some way to go on that one. Then the Special Educational Needs and Disability Act. So people with special educational needs should have equal access to all education provision. Another one, Disability Discrimination Act, because some of these have sort of been updated or amended over the years. Code of Practice to promote racial equality. So we've got this law or code of practice in there to promote racial equality, but we've still got this issue with Black Lives Matters at the moment propping up. Human Rights Act, Race Relations Act, removing barriers to achievement. So that one talks about making sure we're not putting barriers in place that would stop a child learning. So that's talking about, that's what teachers look at, differentiation, amending the curriculum so that everybody can access it equally. Children's Act, Equality Act, another Children's Act, updated one. Disability Equality Scheme and Access Plan. So that's looking at all buildings should be accessible. And a special needs code of practice. So they're the key legislations that are out there to do with equality and diversity. And then they will lead on to, from that legislation comes the policies that we have at school. So key policies, as you can imagine, are accessibility policy and plan. So I just mentioned that's looking at how accessible the curriculum is to everybody, how accessible the building is, access to things like PE, outside play, all those sorts of things come under that policy. Obviously, supporting children with medical needs. So if you've got specific children at school that got specific medical needs, we need to make sure that they have access to the medical support that they need in school, but they also got support to access the curriculum and other pieces at school. Inclusion. So including everybody in the curriculum. Obviously, racial equality. So there should be a policy on racial equality. Incidences of racial discrimination or anything like that that happens at school has to be logged and then logged with the county. Special needs policy. And when we think about special needs here, we're not just thinking about those children that have got learning needs, we're also thinking about gifted and talented children, because sometimes they're forgotten, but it comes under special educational needs policy. Some schools might have a separate gifted and talented policy, or it could be, as just mentioned, as part of the special education needs, because they've got a right to have extension activities, enrichment activities that are going to help them stretch their potential. Equal opportunities. And they're the key policies. So every school should have those policies. The supporting children with medical needs one might come under the first aid policy or the health and safety policy, because sometimes they might bunch them together. So the idea of all these policies is that children participate in the curriculum. That's just a brief there. So like I will do at the end of this course, and I will ask you what worked, what doesn't work, what could make better, etc. And that's what children and young people have got a part to play in that process. So being listened to. So things like this, obviously children are listened to in class. They're allowed to support and express their views. So this is where things like school councils come into place. So most schools have got school councils these days, got a couple of representatives from each class that sit on the council. They take ideas back to the class. They express their views. These views are taken into account and involved in the decision making. There could be something simple like what new play equipment they need out in the playground. But some school councils, the children on school council, are also involved in interviewing potential staff members. So they might sit in, they might have lunch with a potential new staff member, ask them some questions and give their view on what they think of the person. So depending on the school and the school council setup, they can have more input. And it's important that we do this, to make them respect and feel in part of the school curriculum. So equality of access, I've already probably mentioned this, is looking at, as it says there, treating all pupils the same, making sure that the curriculum meets the needs of each individual child. So that's where your differentiation comes in. So, changing materials, resources, so that they can access curriculum, take a full part in the curriculum, and understanding any barriers that may exist. So if you've got a child that's in a wheelchair, it's thinking about what barriers are there for them to get over, or what do we need to do to make sure they can get in there. There's quite a lot to think about, and sometimes we just do things without actually thinking about how we can best access this for everybody. Oh, so that's sort of so this sort of leads you on to 1.3 in your booklet, which asks you to identify benefits of valuing and promoting diversity in the learning environment. So these are some key things, and I thought I'd done these all as blobs. So obviously it reflects the community we live in. If we're accepting all the children that are in the school and reflecting their culture in the school, we're reflecting the community they live in as well. And it helps to build this strong community, sense of community. Helps to remove those misconceptions about groups of people. And some of these misconceptions come from, unfortunately, their parents, and they just get perpetuated in the children. So we need to remove these misconceptions. And that would help in children to learn and understand how others live. So it's important that we give them, everybody, your opportunity. So mention the Black Lives Matters, but if we think about the Black Lives Matters, yes, their lives matter, but everybody's life matters, every culture matters. We can't do everything for them to the exclusion of everybody else. And that's an issue with promoting cultural diversity. Helps reduce conflict. Hopefully helps reduce levels of racism. And hopefully, we'll begin to accept others for what they are. Challenges those stereotypes. And this was hard because some of us have already got find it hard not to stereotype people because it's the way we've been brought up. But it's breaking down those barriers. And then that hopefully reduces any kind of discrimination. And finally, helps children understand social norms. There's quite a lot of things there of why it's important to promote cultural diversity. Have you got anything else you would add to that, or do you think that's quite? So schools, this is fundamental part of the school curriculum is promoting cultural diversity, and lots of schools do it, but tend to do it ad hoc. So you might have a week on Fiji culture or something, or Indian culture, whereas it should be ingrained in the curriculum all the time. So when we look at historical figures in school, we tend to look at those English historical figures, but we need to look at those Black historical figures or Commonwealth cultural figures that have been part of our history. So there's been a bit lately about the history of World War II. We talk about people about like Churchill and the impact of soldiers, but we don't actually talk about the Commonwealth soldiers that came over and were fighting on our behalf, and some of the key figures in there. So it's about making sure that we give them a rounded view of our history, which isn't always easy to do. So that's what this sort of leads on in a bit to, I think it's a bit further on in the booklet, what we're looking at. So as I've already mentioned, this quality of access is important because we need to listen to children. And make sure the appropriate support they need is available. And that's not always easy, especially if they've got what's called an educational care health plan, because they've got special educational needs, because sometimes that support has to be fought for. We've got to remember to all have a right to learn. And I often say that to my soldiers. If I get a soldier that's a bit anti, I say, well, you haven't got the right to stop everybody else learning. If you feel that you can't be in here and learn, perhaps you need to take yourself out. Give everybody the same chances. So, has a disabled person got the chance to join in PE lessons or go on school trips? And that sort of leads on to everyone being treated fairly the same. That's why we have school behaviour policies, to make sure everybody's treated in the same way. That it involves everyone. The children's opinions are valued and respected. Mentioned all these already, will have access to the curriculum. And this one allows everybody to achieve their best. This is where schools need to have high expectations of their children if they're going to achieve their best. So this leads on to 2.1 and 2.2, inequality and diversity. So how do children or young people experience prejudice and discrimination?
If they're not allowed to do something, or if they say have a disability and they're just left out of it.
Yeah, so could be because they've got a disability. Any other ones?
Maybe to do with religion.
Yeah, religion. Yeah, so the main ones are, colour of the skin, their cultural background, name calling, being bullied. That could be for any reason. Could be, got a different colour hair to everybody else. Could be because their clothes are slightly different, or they're perceived to be brighter or weaker than other people. As you mentioned, their religion. So this is why it's key in religious education and PHSE that we look at the different religions. Because unfortunately, some people get the view that Muslims are all terrorists, and actually their religion is, says the complete opposite of that. Could be the language or the country they come from. We have preconceived ideas about the country. It could be because of their gender, especially if they're teenagers. Perhaps they've decided that they're bisexual or gay or something, and they get targeted because of that. And as you mentioned, because they've got a disability or a learning need, and they're perceived to be different, and the children don't understand. We've got a place to trying to prevent all of this. We need to think about how we would deal with these. So 2.1 asks you to give examples in which way children can experience prejudice, and it could be things like family setups. If they live in a particularly, same-sex marriage or something else. It could be because they've got a certain health issue, and that's perceived to be a problem by other children. And things like, with disabilities, it could be other learning needs, things like Asperger's and autism, because children, with those, can be seem very strange to other people. Children that have got Down syndrome or some other inherited illness. So there's quite a large section there of things that they could be experience prejudice and discrimination because of. And I'm going to talk about this, but you'll need to watch it. It's on the VLE. Now this is a video, and it's called A Class Divided, and it was done in the 1960s in America, and it would not be acceptable today. But it's really worth watching because the teacher does an experiment in the class, and she divides the children up dependent on their eye colour. And you can almost immediately see the impact of this discrimination on how they behave in class and out in the playground. So it's only a snapshot. There is a bigger, a longer version that you probably can find on YouTube. And you'll see some adults watching it, and that's the actual children re-watching it when they're a bit older. And she's taken this idea into prisons and everything else to try to educate other people that how our discrimination of children or adults or whoever based on colour or whatever criteria, the impact it has. So it's quite worth watching it. It might make you feel cringe when you're watching it because, say, you wouldn't do it today, but I think it's worth watching because it gets that impact over of how very easily we, perhaps unintentionally, we can put children or young people in this position. So for 2.2, in your booklet, you have got some scenarios, and this is sort of based on this. So for the scenarios, you need to think about how has a child or young person been discriminated? If you think they have, how will they discriminate and by whom? And what you think, why do you think the discrimination happened? And then how do you think the child or young person felt in each case? So what is the impact of prejudice and discrimination How does it make you, make you, sorry, I can't hear.
Isolated,
Isolated, yeah.
emotional issues in the long run.
Yeah. So yeah, so you could feel isolated, you could feel worthless. Do you say isolated, lonely? Fed up? Angry? You might question, why me? Frustrated? And that's just, you know, tip of the iceberg. You can probably think of others. It might affect, it might make you feel sick. You might become very withdrawn. And it, you know, this could have a very short impact if it's nipped in the bud by the school or whoever. It could be quite short term, but if it's not, it could carry on into your, you know, into your teens, into your adult life, and then you can, that's going to impact on your mental health, self-esteem, your self-worth, your self-respect. So this is why it's really important to challenge prejudice and discrimination. So how would you challenge it?
Well, first of all, like you say, was the education side of it to the children in school, like teaching them about it. And maybe if they do something wrong, explaining to them why they shouldn't be doing that.
Yeah, yeah, very true. It's explaining to them why they do it, you know, trying to put themselves in each other, empathize with the other person. Any other ones? How would you do it? Okay, so I've got some things out here. I don't think we shouldn't punish or blame them. I think we've got to say what is better. You know, you mentioned that, Laura. So it's about thinking about, unless it's really a serious thing that's going to cause an injury, obviously, yes, you might punish them for it, but you've got to say what's better. We often punish children and they don't understand why we punish them. So we need to explain to them why. State the school's position. So what is the school's position on dealing with discrimination and prejudice? So it might be written in the school policy what you are expected to do or how the school wants it dealt with. Perhaps understand the situation. Why has this happened? Is there something that's triggered this? So perhaps do a bit of investigation work and then you can put some things in place to help eradicate that. As mentioned, follow school's policies and procedures, be clear about what they are. And depending on your role in the school, might change how you approach this. If you don't feel that you're adequately trained or got the experience to deal with it, you need to pass it on to somebody that can do it. So often schools these days have emotional literacy support assistants, or ELSAs as they're called, who might deal with this. You know, take the children out, have a quiet word or whatever, or it could be the school's SENCO, or it could be the class teacher. So think about your position, your role, and if you're the best person to do it and what approaches should be there. We've already mentioned them. Do we challenge them there and then in front of everybody else? Do you think that's wise, or do we take them
depends on the situation. If it's like young children, then maybe it could be an opportunity to talk to all of them.
Yeah.
But if it's like an older, or maybe if it's a more serious situation, it's better to talk to them, you know, away from people.
Yeah, especially when they, you know, if they're teenagers, young people, you don't want them to lose faith. And that could, you know, so you might want to take them away from the situation, and if it's got heated, if it's ended up in an argument or bullying, you might want to actually calm them both down, or whoever's involved, before you actually challenge them. And we also got to think about those people that have witnessed it. We don't often think about that, but it's talking about people that are being bullied or discriminated against. Sometimes the people that witnessed it find it quite traumatic, and perhaps they need talking to, and their points of view brought into the conversation with the people that have been involved. And that's sometimes why it might be better, as you say, mentioned earlier, if you're younger people, talking to them all in one go. So not actually picking anybody out, but actually talking to the whole class, the whole school about the issue. Because often these things will happen in the playground or at lunchtime. So it might be a good opportunity when they come back from into class to sit them all down and say, heard this has happened at lunchtime. Why do you think it's happened? What can we do about it? How do you think the person felt that was involved? And sort of just do it as a general thing rather than pinpointing people out. And it's also about having suitable role models. So, we're very quick, because we're white and we're British, to get a white and a British person into the class. But we need to get a variety of people in that do a variety of jobs, so that we're giving everybody those role models, and that's helping to challenge the discrimination we feel. And again, you might have particular charities or community groups out there that can come in and help do this. Setting up play events or certain activities that can involve everybody and helps challenge those perceptions and that. And again, it could be using particular books, role play, whatever. So, books on same-sex marriages, different religions, how they celebrate, and sharing those in class. Not just putting them on the bookshelf and hoping somebody's going to look at them, because that's not going to work. And obviously, all schools these days have PHSE lessons. I don't know if this video is going to work. I might just have a quick look at this. It's only a very short clip, and I'm not sure if I might just have to stop sharing for a minute and just check my sounds. Let's share with me. This is a short video clip, so hopefully you can all see it.
This afternoon, we're going to draw people doing different jobs. And the first job we're going to draw is a firefighter.
Have a think in your head what a firefighter looks like.
What's your firefighter called?
Mine's called Firefighter Gary.
Firefighter Stan. Firefighter Simon.
He's big and strong.
He's got a big helmet on. That's brilliant, isn't it?
Next, we're going to draw a surgeon.
Have you thought of a name for your surgeon?
Jim Bob.
Jim Bob.
He's a brain surgeon. I think he would wear a stethoscope. He gives you medicine.
That's his ambulance.
OK, next, we're going to draw a fighter pilot.
Yes. This is his jet plane. He rescues people. He likes to do stunts in the air and stuff.
OK, now, who would like to meet these people for real?
They're dressed up.
My name's Tamsin and I'm a surgeon in the NHS.
My name's Lauren and I'm a pilot in the Royal Air Force.
My name's Lucy. I'm a firefighter in the London Fire Brigade.
So who wants to know how to do an operation?
Who's putting it on?
I'll try
Everyone
my
put it on.
stethoscope.
We put this in here. There you go. Now you're a proper fighter pilot.
So into your ears. Can you hear that?
Yeah.
It's really good.
Yeah, it's much better than the kids' one.
What did you think of that?
No, it's nice that the way that they did it kind of obviously made them all think about it, I expect.
Did you hear the comment by the little girl?
No, I didn't hear that.
They're all dressed up
Oh, what, like fancy dress?
in fancy dress. Yeah, so they've made that assumption straight away, haven't they? That they're dressed up.
That's not their job, yeah.
Yeah. So but it's really interesting that gender perceptions are created by the time a child is 7. So this is where we need to get those positive role models from all cultures, all sexes, all disabilities into school to get across the message that anybody can do these jobs regardless. And it's thinking about, I don't, when you're a teacher, you probably don't think about it, but it is a key part of our work. And I think it's quite interesting. I watch programs on Sky. If Dove had been doing the adverts, and they're women of different colours with disabilities doing high-powered jobs. So it's getting those images into school so that we can challenge those perceptions. So I'm just going to get my PowerPoint up again. Oh, hang on. Share. So I think it's quite an interesting. Oh, I don't want the video clip there. So it's also thinking about those role models. If we're going to promote equality and diversity, it's also looking at things like, what photos have you got on your school prospectus around the school? Do they show all the cultures in the school, or are they all predominantly white? And it's thinking about the literature you've got in the class. Does it reflect disabilities, things like that? If we're going to be a truly inclusive school and an equal and diverse school, we've got to think about all the things that we use within school. So things like photos, making sure that we've got a range of work from different children in the school out on display, making sure the prospectus, the website reflects the cultures in the school. And we had to do that at work. So in all our classrooms at work, we've got some photos of soldiers doing different jobs that reflect different cultures, different sexes, so that everybody feels included. If you're just displaying white British photos throughout your prospectus, your curriculum, you're not being equal and diverse. So it's really important if we're going to get that sense of community and everybody feels included and diverse. So that sort of comes under 2.3, which it says describe how to promote anti-discriminatory practice in work with children. We've mentioned all these already, making sure everyone has a voice, treating everybody equal, making sure that their culture and their religion is involved in the curriculum across the whole curriculum, not just token cultural days. And it thinks about often if you go into a school in the main hall or entrance hall, you usually have multicultural hello signs, and that's where they stop. But why can't we have them around the school in other places? You know, on classroom doors, on toilet doors. It's about having those things everywhere. Obviously, the teaching and experiences we give them, as I mentioned already, those multicultural signs, multicultural books, multicultural resources. So it's making sure, like in reception or nursery, you've got a mixture of dolls that reflect the different cultures, even disabled dolls. So there is a company that actually makes disabled dolls, because the woman that did them had a disabled daughter and couldn't find a doll that reflected her daughter's disability. So she started making them. So it's having things like that in class, you know, if you've got disabled children in the school. Already mentioned the photos of the work, and obviously challenging inappropriate behaviour. They're all the ways we can promote that anti-discriminatory practice in work. And it could be, you know, getting parents in of multicultural children that can perhaps teach them some of the language, so that, you know, they can say hello in different languages or say please and thank you. So it's all those things that help us to accept those things. So we're going to move on to inclusion, which comes under, the pages seem to be out of order. So inclusion really just builds on the equality and diversity and things that we've already mentioned. So inclusion is making sure, as we've already mentioned, that everybody has access to school life and can reach their potential. And so inclusive practices must include things like differentiation of learning, resources, equipment, that everyone can take part in the learning. And again, on the VLE, there are two videos. One's a primary school and one's a secondary school. And these were done to show good practice in inclusive schools. So especially in the primary one, you will see that the disabled children and everything are, and even children with learning needs are in the class all the time, supported by a TA that helps them access the curriculum. And the children look after them. They've amended, the playground has been built with them in mind, so they can get up and do the things that all able-bodied children can do, etc. Secondary one's probably a bit more difficult, but things like they've put toilets in different places so that they can access them. They don't have to go to one building to access a disabled toilet, putting lifts in and things like that. So they're both worth watching to see, and they will help you explain 3.2, how inclusion works in the learning environment. So how inclusion should look at an inclusive things. As we mentioned already, barriers are removed. This is where you need to know your children. So if you're a TA that's been allocated to on a one-to-one with a child, you need to know that child really, really well, so that you know, with the teacher's help, the best way of helping that child access the curriculum. So if you've got a child that's got speech problems, perhaps it's using assistive technology, or perhaps they use some other form of communication, and then it's knowing how to amend the curriculum. So when you work in a school as a TA, you really need to have a good working relationship with your teacher. So we've talked about that, equipment adapted, that personal support. Those resources are specific to them. And you'll see that in the primary video, how they've adapted some of the resources so that the child can still take part in that lesson. This is a thing that happens a lot. In the primary school video, you'll see that the pupils are educated alongside their peers, but this is what happens a lot of the time. They're taken out for one-to-ones or segregated and doing something separate, and that is not giving a child an inclusive education. We want to try and minimise the time we take these children out of class. And this one's really important, that the school works with all people. So that's the staff, the governors, parents, children, carers, outside agencies, so that everybody is working to a common goal. And we sort of talked about that in the safeguarding thing, about how when that doesn't happen is when children fall through the gaps. So we need to make sure it happens here. And it's about building those relationships, having joint meetings, having that phone conversation, having a quick chat at the end of the day to make sure that we are working for the best of that child. And I'll just mention that.
Is there like sort of laid out like how far a school has to go to accommodate a child into like a mainstream school before they get said, oh, the school can't accommodate it? Do you know what I mean? Is there like some sort of line? Because obviously with the inclusion thing.
Yeah, there will be. It will. Yeah, so it will be sort of the school and this SENCO looking at the child's educational health plan if they've got one. And most children with special education needs or disability will probably have one, and looking at what their needs are and thinking about how practical it is to accommodate those. Now, some parents would love their children to be obviously in a normal school.
Yeah.
But sometimes it can be difficult. So, and that's where you've got obviously I'm thinking here in Amesbury. So we got no, actually I don't think of Salisbury because it is. So there's a school in Salisbury that I know has got a hearing impaired unit. So they will accommodate hearing impaired children. There's another school that's got a specific learning difficulties unit. So they're geared up to take particular, children with particular learning needs. But it's also thinking about if the school can't address those learning needs, perhaps they do need to go to a special school. And a school can refuse to take them if they don't feel they're ready, but they should put as much in place as they possibly can. So it might be in their special educational needs policy, or it might be under their equality and diversity policy or their access policy. So I think I was looking at the access policy of St Michael's in Fildeen, and I think they were very quite specific about the things that they were trying to do and what needed to do and that sort of thing, and it needs to be updated on a daily basis. So each child will have to be looked at their own merit. So thinking back to when I was first started teaching, we had I was teaching year 5 and 6 at the time, and we had a child that we were asked to take who basically had been excluded for every school in the neighbourhood, and we put off that because we felt we weren't in a place to take him, but we had to take him in the end because we had spaces and we couldn't use it as an excuse anymore. But he literally did a runner the first day he was there. He went over the fence. So we did as much as we could, but in the end, they had to make the decision that he needed to go somewhere else. So it's that conversation with the school about what they can do. And then it's making sure that you have got the support staff there for them, and that's where you get your one-to-one support staff. So some children will have a dedicated one-to-one teaching assistant. Some children might have the use of a teaching assistant for a particular amount of time, but not all the time. It'll depend on their particular needs. So, and that's where schools have also got to make sure if they take a teaching assistant on to work with that child, that teaching assistant is happy to work with that child with those learning needs. And that's where you might want to, if you do go to work in a school as a teaching assistant, you might want to specialise in a particular topic. So there are courses out there like on, level 2 courses on autism, on emotional literacy support. There are courses out there that you might want to take, and some of those are free actually. So I did a level 2 course on mental health issues with children last year through Wiltshire College. It was just an online course. So there are some free courses out there. So if you feel that when you want to, you want to sort of specialise along that way, and that'll be a string to your bow. So I had a learner who did level 3 last year who had real trouble because her daughter had got autism and quite severe autism, and she was in a local school, but she was having a real battle because the teaching assistant they employed in the first instance wasn't suitable for that child and caused more issues than not having one. So they had to sort of look out for it again. So it's quite a minefield. It's quite a big topic, and that's why SENCOs these days tend to be non-teaching members of staff, because it is such a vast area and you've got to liaise with all these people. So to be inclusive, we need to think about these things, and there are probably some things we've already mentioned. And what I've done you'll see in the workbook, I've lost it. Oh, perhaps it's not in here. No, it's propped up. So to be inclusive, we need to think about all these things. If we've got any concerns about a child, they are struggling for whatever reason, we need to get those identified and sorted as quickly as possible. You may, or it won't be your concern, but when I was a teacher at school, we had a child that supposedly had a bowel issue, and he had to go to the toilet as and when he wanted. But actually, he was just going out of the classroom and not actually going to the toilet. So he was playing on it. So we decided that we wanted to put some interventions in place. But the dad for some reason, was very anti and was kicked against it. So we couldn't put anything in place for that child, even though that child needed it. So, this is what we'd love to do, but sometimes parents can be quite anti about it. Mentioned this already, having high expectations of all children. So regardless of their learning ability, being able to stretch them and having high expectations of them. We mentioned this already, listening to children. Get them involved in their learning. This works, this is especially important with those children that have got sort of some learning needs. So an autistic child can get very fixated on a particular topic. So my eldest grandson is slightly on the autistic thing, and he was fixated with trains. So if you can involve their learning to something to do with trains, they're more likely to come on board and learn. It takes a bit of work, but that's what we should be doing. We've already mentioned this, thinking about materials and resources that reflect the diversity in society. And working as a team, and including parents. You, the parent, are the expert on your child. You know what works best for your child in most cases. If there's any issues, it's working with the parents as well. Think about different strategies. And you'll see that, you'll see that in that primary video, using different strategies to support children. Think about what the child's targets are. So if they are disabled and got, quite severe learning needs, the targets are going to be a lot smaller than a child of the same age. But they've got to be targets that they potentially can achieve. And those small steps will make them having high expectations work. As we mentioned this already, knowing the background of your child, their interests. Oh, sorry. Go back to them. So there are all those things there. So I'm just going to go through the booklet so that just get the book up. So we've mentioned the legislation and the guidance, and that goes on the document, separate document. We've mentioned the policies. So you've got to describe how the policies in schools and colleges support the rights of all the children. So basically the policies lead on from the legislation to make sure that everybody has the same rights. Benefits. So we've mentioned that. We've mentioned examples, and say you can put some more in there, other ones you can think of. And then these are the scenarios. So you've got some scenarios, and you just literally got to, you can actually number them if you want. So you can put 1, yes, no, 2, who's done the discrimination and who's it against, 3, why has the discrimination happened, and 4, how do you think the child or young person felt in each case. So there's sort of little mini scenarios. I think that's 4 of them. So we've mentioned how to promote discriminatory work. So thinking about, those role models, who comes in school, etc. We've done that, what's meant by inclusive practices, and again, there's stuff on the VLE about that one. So the video will help you with that one, explain how inclusion works in the learning environment, but we've mentioned things like differentiation, resources, learning, etc. And then you've got a few scenarios. So when you read these, you've got to think about, has the child had access to an inclusive education? So the first one, we meet Reese, we join him in year 5. He's a global learning delay. That means he's got learning delays across all areas. His expressive and receptive language skills are undeveloped for his age. Each day, Mandy, a teaching assistant, takes Reese out of the classroom with Sula and Nathan to work on their social language. They practice important skills such as greeting people, taking turns, and not interrupting. But here's the thing, Sula and Nathan have communication difficulties too. So is that being inclusive?
No.
No, because he's working with people the same. Yeah, why can't that be done in class? So that he's working with his peers and with, children that are normal. I hate that word, but you know what I mean. So let's think about those things there. And then you've got some others here. So it's just I'm thinking about, have they got an inclusive education? What needs to be done to make it more inclusive for them? There's 4 there, no 5. Okay. This one is about a gifted and talented child. So if you've got a gifted and talented child, how are you going to make them be more included in the thing? And then this is and this will come again through, especially in the primary video, how you ensure the inclusion of children and young people with special education needs or disabilities. That's working with a class teacher, working with a parent, etc. And then what are the benefits? If you wanted to, you could probably, you could lump those two together. And that's it for that one. So what I will do is I will upload the video and send you the link for that. Have a look at the videos on the VLE, and especially that class divided one, because I think that does really get the point across about prejudice and discrimination. And this module is not due into the first week back after the first week of January. So the week commencing the 4th of January. So module 5 and module 6 are not due until then. So if you do them before then, you quite happily send them to me. As I mentioned to Laura, I go on leave on lunchtime on the 14th. But if I get any work sent in before that, I will definitely get it marked and get feedback to you. So you've got something, you've got it and work on it over the holidays. And I will pick up the odd email. So if there's something urgent that you want me to respond to, if you send me an email and mark it as high importance, and I will look at it even though I'm on leave. Okay. Except not Christmas Day or Boxing Day.
You're busy building toys and stuff on Christmas Day.
I haven't decided what I'm going to do at Christmas yet. I just cannot make up my mind. Yeah, so